Hi friends, Rich here and welcome back to the Movement Podcast. In this series, we're looking at how you can make a creative impact in the world in which you live. Today's episode, we're talking to our friend Paul Nelson, who's the leader of Bright City and the worship pastor at St. Peter's Brighton. He's passionate about working creatively in community and as a team. So we sent Matt off to have a chat with him.
Welcome back to the Movement Podcast. We're here with Paul Nelson. It's great to have you, Paul.
Great to be here.
We're going to find out a little bit more about what you get up to just after we played my favourite game of 2-minute testimony. And Paul, you've picked your banger to end the
Yeah, my ringtone.
But Paul, let's hear your 2-minute testimony starting now.
Oh man, my 2-minute testimony. I think with my testimony, it's like one of those things where you think for a long period of your life you have quite a boring testimony. And what I mean by that is, you know, I don't have a big story around being on drugs, or not that's, I don't know why I laughed then. So I shouldn't have laughed. But I don't have, it's not a very dramatic story. My story is that I've never known a time without God. You know, born into a really loving Christian mum and dad. They modelled a relationship with Jesus, what that looks like, going to church, being part of a church community, and was part of an amazing youth group growing up. And so I say boring, but actually the more I've sat with it, the more I think it's just an amazing testimony. It's the testimony I want for my own children. I've got 3 daughters, and I would love my girls to be able to say when they grow older, like, I've never known a time without, I can't remember not knowing his presence with me. And of course you have your moments, and there's definitely been some significant times of surrender, particularly as a teenager, getting baptized. Actually at festivals, Soul Survival was really significant for me growing up. I think the surrender thing's quite a daily thing anyway, isn't it? But I can really remember clearly some times of saying, Lord, take my life. And even going to university, that's quite a formative time of your life, isn't it? And remember having to think, first day I arrived in university, thinking, Lord, I'm going to have to choose. New set of friends, new environment. I'm going to have to choose to surrender. So yeah.
There you go. That is a quick fire 2-minute testimony from Paul Nelson. And you know what? It's actually really encouraging. I was chatting to a friend about this whole idea of, we want to see testimonies where God's been at work throughout my whole life. I've known that, and that's what we long. You said for your children, but we long to see people who've known Jesus and live it out. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And we're here in Brighton. We're at St. Peter's right now, and you head up all things worship really here. Under Bright City. Maybe you could tell us a bit of the story behind that, the journey behind that, and sort of where you're at. Yeah,
well, so 10 years ago now, just over 10 years ago, a team of us from Holy Trinity Brompton in London planted down in Brighton. It was the first church plant that Holy Trinity Brompton HTB had done outside of London. Yeah, I've been on team from day one, which has been amazing as the worship pastor. Amazing privilege to see it from nothing to where we are today, and then I suppose overseeing the worship team and the worship life of the church has eventually led us to this sort of umbrella for the team of Bright City. So that really got birthed about 5 or so years in, 5 or 6 years in. Sam Coates, actually, who's the Archie and Sam lead the church together. She had a word. I can't remember who it was for, whether for me or for us as a team, but that there was time for a new song. And I knew of a number of songwriters within the church, and it was something I would say that we'd done a bit of. We tried to use the odd song, homegrown song, and we've always believed that was a good thing to do. But we decided with that word to get a bit more intentional about that. So we gathered about 13 or so of our worship leaders, songwriters, for an intentional 3-day songwriting retreat, is what we called it at the time. But just where we hung out, had lots of food together, but just said, look, there's no rules. Let's just see what's on people's hearts, see what songs are. And a bit to our surprise, actually, we didn't have any plan or scheme for it. It was just an amazing time. We probably came off the back of that 3 days with around 30 to 40 songs on a sort of board, and we just all were like, this is amazing. And so, yeah, without much thought really, or pre-thought, we just thought, oh, I think we're sitting on something here that we need to get a bit more intentional about. So we began from that place, really kind of working out what God was doing, calling us to, and eventually that 30, 40 songs became our sort of first record, which we called, everything was called Bright City. Bright City was the name we came up with, which I can talk more about, but the album was called Bright City and the first song was called Bright City. So we needed to grow a little bit in originality around the name, but we released that back in 2013, and it's kind of gone from there really.
Yeah, and that name's significant though. There's a reason the album was called that. There's a reason the collective's called that. The first song, maybe you could share a little bit about.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, I joked about it, but there was actually a strong reason for that. I mean, I think we were searching for something that summed up the vision for us, something of the movement connection between the worship life of the church, but also the mission of the church. And we were drawn to that passage in Matthew's Gospel where Jesus says, you're a city on a hill that can't be hidden. You know, you don't light a lamp and put it under a bucket. You put it on a stand for all the room to light up the room, and you're a city on a hill that can't be hidden. And we thought that was an amazing picture of kind of what we do when we worship. You know, we're putting our lamp on a stand and we're saying, we're lifting his name high. And funnily enough, in Brighton's very hilly. If you've walked around a bit, guys today.
Done a couple of hills.
Yeah. But and then we happen to be right in the valley of Brighton, but St. Peter's is right in the centre of town. But it feels significant to us that it's right in the valley of the city. But it's as we worship and as we push, as a church community, we become a city on a hill that can't be hidden. And also Bright City is also a play on the name of our town, of our city, Brighton. So and we do believe actually that as we worship, Brighton's coming alive. So
incredible.
Yeah, so
incredible. And you say 9 years now.
Over 10 years we've been here. Yeah.
Over 10 years, that's a long time. That's a lot of commitment.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that on your first one, you gathered together. You got all your different worship leaders, songwriters. You got that together.
Yeah.
What does collaboration look like between you as a community and you as a worshiping community, and that family essence of that? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. Well, that really is the key to our whole thing. Really, I think. We definitely didn't have what we have now until we got together. You know, it was the getting together. It was that initial songwriting retreat, particularly that was a spark for a lot of things that have come now over the years, and that we're still walking into. I'd say it was the act of kind of that community moment together. I mean, there's a couple of things I could talk about practically there that, community is so powerful. One of the reasons is particularly around things like music and creativity and art, and that can be quite a lone, and actually there's times I think for an idea or to be birthed in a sort of isolated, you just you're walking along and you get an idea of something, could be anything, and so that's how I think a lot of ideas are birthed, and you should be ready to be inspired at all times, I think. Yeah. But certainly, I can talk about songwriting, but I think it applies to other creative forms too. Like, we've found that getting together is just been like, I suppose what we would say is that we would never have this if we hadn't got together. This song would not be this song if we didn't have each other. Yeah. I could not have come up with this by myself. And so we found it's been beautiful to get together. Community kills competition. That's an amazing thing. Really does counter any competition. So we've had to work quite hard at and be really intentional at being for one another, cheering each other on. But if you can get that right, there's something that's so God's heart as well, isn't it? That kind of being for, you see even within the Trinity, them just being sort of for one another. I think it's so even very down to very practical things. When we get together to songwrite, we would have a time where we'd critique like a song. Maybe we've been working in collaboration with 2 or 3 members of the team, and then we come together with a wider team and we bring the song to the room. We call those times moral gossip sessions. Okay. And the reason we call them moral gossip is because we say, look, whatever you want to say about a song, you have to say in the room. So it's gossip because we're talking about the song, and it's moral because we say it in front of their face. So we don't kind of hold it back and then out in the corridor say, oh, I actually thought that was terrible.
Yeah.
We like, so we've kind of committed our lives to one another in the sense, because that sharing a song or being creative together is really vulnerable, isn't it? It's like your heart on the sleeve. So I think as a general collective in terms of the church and what we're doing, we're now, and we're always growing and always trying to think how we do it better. But we're leaning into sort of feedback, being open with each other.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'd say for myself, I've been blessed by the songs that have come out from Bright City. And I think what would be really insightful, I guess, is what would you have told yourself at the start of this journey, where we've got guys listening perhaps who are on the early days of what it looks like to mean to have this community, to have this at the start of their journey, and I'm sure that looks different and that looks varies in every context, but what would you say to yourself, but also to someone perhaps at the start of that road?
I think I would say thinking about the kind of collective thing, particularly in the kind of community, and that you're trying to build a team of creatives, quite sensitive types, but so much potential in people. I would say don't underestimate just getting together regularly. What can be birthed out of just, that's our story, and that remains our story. It actually is really quite a simple model. It just sort of is been when we've stopped getting together, stopped doing life together, stopped, like it sort of
effect swings.
It drifts off a bit. Just love people. Love your team, love the people that God's put in your care, if you like, or but also only carry the weight that you're meant to carry. So don't. I think that some of the mistakes I've made, particularly when you are running a team of quite sensitive people, and there's a lot of stuff in each of us, isn't there? Like a lot of insecurity in me, and when you are a family, all that sort of comes out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I think, I would say, you just keep coming to God for everything. Don't. I think I've carried weights and stuff that I probably shouldn't have carried emotionally, and just don't know if that might resonate to no one or might resonate with someone, but Jesus talks about his yoke being easy, his burden being light, and I think I've sometimes carried like people's, because I really passionately love people, and particularly the people in my team, and it's that can be hard, and there's lots of different people's hopes and expectations and often dreams actually through, and but I think just make sure you only carry what you should be carrying, which you can only really, in your relationship with Jesus, plug in there. You got to plug in there with your own walk with God, and then just out of that love people as best you can, and get people together. Encouragement is so prophetic. Encouragement is so close to prophecy, isn't it? When you speak life into someone, when you see something good. We have a lot of young people in our team, and it's just all built on kind of encouragement, really. It's like, mate, go for it. This is awesome. And we try and set people up to win. But there's a lot of encouragement. There is also a lot of feedback. There's a lot of honest, real. It's not all just sort of,
all highs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, this. But we do try and set people up to win, particularly when we talk about youth or. And we have lots of different contexts as well for people to win. So lots of chances for people to lead worship in different size contexts. But most of the growth of our team is coming up through young people. So I love all that. I was developed like that as a young person. I mentioned being part of a great youth group, having a youth leader that just loved me, saw some potential, gave me a chance, developed me when I could only play a couple of chords or not even, and sort of think, man, everyone needs that. So we have quite a high encouragement culture as well. But yeah.
And I guess in the sense of growing these communities, and so often people could be looking from the outside and be like, oh, these guys have got something here. I'm not sure I add to it. I'm not sure I can be a part of it. How is it that you welcome people into that space? How is it? Because encouragement's a huge thing.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily just begin within the process. I guess inviting people in and giving the opportunity, as you say, that's a big part of what you guys do. Or what was that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're always evaluating how we get people involved. One of the things, this won't be necessarily totally relevant in within the spheres that you're in, but we've recently moved our kind of musician model to more like a set band model. Okay. Because we found that we could just get people involved, more people involved into sort of set band context rather than a pool of musicians. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons for that was that kind of giving someone a chance, or it was a way for us to grow the team whilst growing community. So we kind of, rather than the team being sort of 40, 50 people and they're just sort of being, I'm getting lost in this team, you became part of a little band of people. But then we found that in deploying people into that as well was easier, a second electric player so I don't know, I think you just always have to look at your own situation, work out what the next move is. I mean, we're forever changing. There's no perfect model of getting people involved. And no perfect model of running a team. I think you just have to, what I was doing on day one, probably values wise, and it's the same, but it's, model wise and strategy was totally different. I mean, I think the most helpful thing I've ever heard in terms of deployment and getting, is that you have to do 6 things all the time. You have to, if this is helpful, this might not be helpful, and you can cut it out if it's terrible. But you have, in terms of like recruiting team and spotting, spotting people for your collective, or like you have to identify, recruit, train, deploy, monitor and nurture. And I've found that really helpful because you have to kind of be doing all 6 the whole time, sort of going back to the eye, identifying. So you need to have a sense of who am I. We go quite big on with spotting, sort of trying to spot heart. That's what Samuel, in the book of Samuel, spots in King David, who becomes the kind of key, he becomes king, but he's the sort of like that worship leader figure, wrote all the Psalms, and God says to Samuel, no, don't look at outward appearance. He looks at all his brothers and thinks that his strong, big, burly brothers are the king, and says, no, God, I look at the heart. God looks at the heart. So I think we look for heart, and that's particularly in young people when maybe their competency isn't quite there, or we look for heart. So, but you always need to be identifying, then kind of recruiting people into some form of something. We just give people the vision really and say, just come be part of it. Don't come be the elect. We try and avoid like people having their identity in their role. Like, don't come be the electric guitar player. Just come be part of the family. Yes. And then you might play electric. A lot of our team would be a graphic designer. They might do a bunch of stuff for our church here. They might play bass. They might then do sound. They might do words, then put away chairs. It's just part of the family.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, I think, for creatives as well, that you feel part of a family as opposed to just for your role. I think that dries up when you just feel like you're just I'm just being used for my function here. So we have a really high value on that. And it means that if they need to drop out of the team for a bit, because to invest in their relationship with Jesus, that it's all about that. Yeah. So, recruiting them into the vision and then deploying them appropriately, training them appropriately, then monitoring, which we do a lot through team nights, and nurturing, which again, just through meeting up, hanging out. So I think those 6 things I found really helpful, just in terms of getting people involved. I don't know if this is all. The only other thing I'd say on the whole, like creative, the collective, the community thing, is one principle we've worked by, which actually I picked up from Hillsong. It's a really helpful principle, is when you've got a creative community together and you're like, what do I do? There's so much potential in the room, or whatever context you're in. You feel it, and it's like, we could do something new here. Like this is that. Try and say yes if you can to ideas. So when someone has an idea, or what about if we did this? If you can, say yes, because I think that brings a lot of life. Obviously, I remember one time when a girl in our team, because we are quite a spread of, not all musicians. I've talked a lot about music today, but came to me and said, I've got a real vision. I can see us doing a short film around Easter, around the message of the cross, and I'd love to do that. And sort of without hesitation, I said, yep, we should do that. And we had no sense of how we were going to do that, but I knew my role in it was just to say yes and to encourage. And of course you can't do that all the time, but we then went through a process of practically just making that happen. And eventually we did do a little short film called This Is Love, which we did on we did it for our Good Friday service here in Brighton a couple of years ago. But I remember just standing in the service, like tears streaming down my face, watching this amazing 12-minute long to all our music, as homegrown music as well, and this is beautiful short film of the message of the cross and God's love for us and what Jesus did, and just thinking, wow, this is like amazing. It's a dream come true for me. But I think it only started with someone saying, that's the idea. And anyway, I'm babbling on.
No, and I mean, stepping out, giving those a go, but you did it together. You said yes as a team, and you worked through that. And I guess as we come towards the end of our time together.
Talk so much, Matt.
No, Paul, I could listen to you for hours, honestly. I really could.
I want to hear from you, Matt.
Yeah. Next week. Next episode. But I guess wrapping things up as such. Final words of wisdom, final little bit of advice for those guys who have maybe caught on a bit of that. They've caught a glimpse of the heart. They've caught a glimpse of what could potentially be in their own context. What's that final ignition? What's that final words of?
Well, there's this thing that King David does where, when he kills Goliath, he there's this song that kicks up from the women. The Bible describes women singing this song, that Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands. And what David does is he walks straight through the song, and he doesn't get distracted by the song of man, if you like, or of woman in that case. But like, he doesn't get. He walks straight through, and he just carries on to what God's calling him to. He carries on being himself. He keeps his. Whereas what the Bible describes that happens to Saul when Saul hears that song, Saul says that he could not get over that song, and he kept a jealous eye on David, and Saul hardens his heart in that moment before God, and is just so bothered by the song of man, and Saul is not plugged into the song of God He's not plugged into God's heart. He's not keeping his heart soft for God. And that becomes the kind of downfall of Saul in some way. There'll be times if you're a songwriter, where a song impacts someone and you get this impact back of like, oh, people love my song. That's awesome. But you have to just keep going through that. You just go through that because that fades off anyway. Root yourself in his love for you. I think that's the key thing. Like, that's what David did. He just knew God's love for him, so he just stayed super secure, super rooted. And then when there was applause from the women or whatever, and when it was going well, it's fine. I'm rooted in the love of God. But when it wasn't going well, it's fine. I'm rooted in the love of God. That never changes. So that would be my encouragement, probably. After all that, I should have just said, just stay rooted in the love of God.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks, Matt, man.
There's so much wisdom, and you've got some exciting stuff coming up. Where can people stay plugged in? Where can people keep up to date with Bright City and what you guys have got on at the moment? Oh,
thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, well, we just recorded back in November, actually our 10-year anniversary. We, as the kind of community here at St. Peter's Brighton, we decided to record a live album, really actually along the lines of the vision, as a sort of shout of praise for the next 10 years in the city. So we recorded that live here at St. Peter's back in November, and the first song actually comes out on I don't know when this will get released.
It's coming out at towards the start of next month.
Great. So the first song should be out there already, called Change. It's the first single from the record. It's really the sort of song of the record. It sums up a lot of our vision at the moment. It's called Change, and you can find that at brightcityuk.com or on our Instagram, brightcityuk, and on our YouTube and stuff. There's a video.
Brilliant. Yeah. And we watched the short film Paul mentioned earlier
yesterday.
You can get that on the website as well.
Nice.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to be here in Brighton at St. Peter's, hearing about Bright City and the heart to go after it together, the heart to stay rooted in God, and all the things you're pursuing here.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Well, thanks for that, Paul. Really encouraging stuff about how we can be working together creatively as a team. So at this point in the podcast, we ask you 3 questions, and these are for you to think about yourself or maybe as a group with your friends. Can you identify people in your lives that are passionate about the same thing as you? How are you currently seeking after God's calling together? What foundations need to be laid for your community to take things to the next level? Well, that's it for this episode, folks, and actually that is it for this series. We hope you've enjoyed it. We've had fun making it, and we really hope that you've managed to engage with some of the content and some of the things that have been said. But we always love to hear from you, and so make sure that you send us an email, podcast@wearemovement.net, if you've got anything you want to feed back to us about how it's made an impact to you. And make sure you stay connected with us on our social media, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube. But for now, take care and we'll see you soon.